Alright everyone, there's so much fun stuff to cover today that it was hard for me to figure out which one was going to go first, but I think I'm going to go with the tried and true with Joe Biden. Joe Biden coming out yesterday saying, well, I wouldn't legalize marijuana because it might be a gateway drug, and I was thinking, the dude is so warped, so incoherent, and so obviously demented, and this is the first time like something that's off the wall that he said could actually hurt his campaign. The vast majority, something like, what is it, like 70+% of Democrats want to legalize weed. More than half of the general population does, and I think almost a slim majority of Republicans do. This is a dead issue. There is no political faction within the United States that does not, at least by a slim majority, support legalizing recreational marijuana. A lot of us would go far further. To her credit, this is hilarious to me. Wasn't it Kamala Harris? AOC came out and said, well, we should legalize pot and decriminalize drug use in general. Well, that is technically taking it a step further than the rest of the Dems. Most Democrats aren't even on board with legalizing other substances. I've been for some time because, I actually used them. Having dropped acid years ago, taken shrooms, mescaline, I took amanita mushrooms, morning glory. What else did I take? I was stoned at the time, so it's harder to remember. Salvia, smoking weed, doing all these things. The one that fucked me up was legal at the time, which was spice. All these other substances, other than a fairly bad trip that I had on psilocybin, which was unpleasant, I never jumped out a window, nothing ever. The idea that it's even addictive is bullshit. The idea that salvia divinorum is addictive is bullshit. You can become a bit habituated, like it's interesting enough that you want to do it again. There's no chemical addiction property at all. The idea that you could habituate yourself in a general sense would be difficult because it's so, debilitating, at least short term. You can't use it and drive. You couldn't use it and function in public. It's the sort of thing you could explicitly do on your own, maybe with friends. By the way, disclaimer, I'm not giving you any legal advice here or any harm reduction advice or anything. I'm not telling you to use any substances that they're safe. My opinion, though, is that having actually utilized them, well, for me, I guess they were. Other than the legal one, the government had no problem with me, smoking as much spice as I wanted to, and it really messed me up for a very long time. Anyway, Joe, the 80s called. They want their drug policy back. You literally have to go back 4 decades to find the dawn of a gateway drug. And think about it this way. Here's the funny part. The gateway drug myth, because it is a myth, and I'll explain how, was actually more tempered than what came before. What came before was pot made you crazy, pot made you reefer madness. Reefer madness lasts from the 1920s sort of moralist era all the way up through the end of the 70s. Weed'll make you insane. Weed'll make you a criminal. Weed'll make you violent. Will rot your brain out. We now know that this is by and large hyperbole. The only main problem with weed, if you're smoking it in the conventional sense, it does contain tar. And while it's not chemically addictive, it can be habituating. So people will self-medicate, they feel depressed or whatever, they become hooked on it for that reason, but it's not really that much different than coffee, or eating a lot of sugar when you're depressed, or chocolate or whatever. Or smoking certainly would be way more addictive. Smoking and alcohol usage are far more addictive, far more dangerous than pretty much any other class of drug, and they're legal. So, this is the 1980s, sort of the Reagan just say no era. Well, weed in and of itself. This is what the Reaganites and Clintonians did as a sort of bullshit. This was from the era when the Democrats were in favor of civil unions, just to put it in context. They said, pot on its own isn't a problem. No. Little Jimmy smokes weed. It probably doesn't make him a criminal, but it can be a gateway, and so we want to prevent it from being used. We want to make sure that people stop using pot too, because pretty soon they'll use heroin. Now, studies that showed a correlation in U.S. literature between weed and other drugs are technically true, but it is a dirty half-truth. The truth is that if they bothered to look at their results in more depth, they would find that usually it was people who were using hard substances who started smoking marijuana. Here's where the crossover is. They started using pot for some of the withdrawal symptoms. Heroin junkie, they're withdrawing, they smoke pot, maybe they can get some food down. Alcohol is another go-to a lot of times for people who are on hooked to the heroin or crack or whatever. They dull their senses with alcohol. I did this with tobacco. I quit tobacco, but I became an alcoholic for a while. It was a big problem. Of course, I'm off that now, but, it was a problem at the time. As far as marijuana being a gateway drug, though, the only gateway it is to is giggling at yourself. I smoked pot, and I was getting the good shit at UVM, which I'm not even going to tell you how much they overcharge for a gram on that campus. Yeah, it's some great fun. If you're into that sort of thing, it's also a waste of time, and it quickly grew old because in my use, I was always more interested in the spiritual side, because I've always kind of been into that, so I was more into psychotropics that were more powerful. At the very least, something like Morning Glory or an Amanita trip. And I sought fervently for acid, finally got some. I thought that was like the greatest day ever when I tried that. It's addictive to the extent that you want to go and have another Psychonaut adventure once in a while watching Yellow Submarine, but it's not chemically addictive. As far as pot, it's not either. And by the way, tens of millions of people in the United States use it regularly. So Joe Biden's like, oh, keep throwing them in jail. Yeah, fuck the fact that the prison system is clogged up and that they're not harming anyone by their simple usage. Look, I'm here in Amsterdam, like the pot capital of Europe. Weed's legal here, and I've smelled weed a few times. It's not very common. Actually, I think usage here is less than in the United States by probably a pretty significant margin. I have a feeling more people use edibles here as well. I've seen some shops that have that. And a lot of it's like tourism related. Has it caused the collapse of Dutch society, the fact that marijuana is legal in this country? No, there's like construction projects everywhere. Everything's like, generally going well. Vermont's had legal weed for a while. Vermont's not falling apart. New Hampshire decriminalized it, I think, a year or two ago. They're not falling apart. Come on. How many states have it legal anyway, Joe? At what point is the federal government going to realize that it's become an ungovernable law because of the fact that the states know better? Here's a great example of states' rights are a great thing. This is why Democrats need to embrace the concept of sovereignty at lower than federal level and stop with the federalistic bullshit. The states have largely begun embracing at least medical marijuana, in some cases decriminalization, and in a few cases outright legalization under various schemas. These societies have not collapsed as a result of that. Use is arguably going to drop over time. This is exactly what happened with alcohol prohibition. Prohibition kicks in, the rate of alcoholism in the United States rose significantly. It did. More people were getting drunk because there was no treatment available. They were drinking cheap moonshine or shelf wine or strong brandy they got, as a prescription from the doctor for their cough that never went away. They weren't able to drink like a regular beer. They weren't able to have, regulated sources of alcohol that wouldn't blind them or something. And so they became much more chronically alcoholic. Prohibition ends. Treatment is implemented for people who can't get off the bottle. All of a sudden, the rates decline. Wow! And crime's attendant to it. And revenue comes into the government because they insist on taxing everything. I don't think Vermont taxes weed at the moment. Like, you can have a couple of plants you can grow, and there's a certain number of per person, per property of juvenile versus adult versus ounces of cured product, and it's kind of a weird system, but it's better than what you had before. You don't have to worry. The fact that you have your happy Harold the hippie has one pot plant in his garden, he's not going to have to worry about the Gestapo breaking down his door at 2 a.m. and killing his dog and raping his wife. I think that's an improvement. Apparently Joe Biden doesn't agree with me. Fuck him. And again, this can hurt him. Most of his incoherent mistakes are like, well, that's Joe being Joe. This is not a good issue, Biden. You are not even close to, who are you trying to appease within the Democratic Party by doing this? Evangelical Democrats? Elderly Democrats? The people that are, part of your bloc anyway? Where's the attempt to outreach to a new voting bloc to secure the nomination? And woe unto you if you get into the general, you will be punished for this view by independents like me. This would be a no-go zone for me. The fact that he could be dumb enough to continue supporting that particular aspect of the drug war is so far beyond the pale that it shows me he's not a reasonable, sane enough individual to govern the country. This would literally be a make or break issue for me. If a person does not at least tacitly support the concept that it should be a states issue, like Trump does, Trump is more progressive on weed than Joe Biden, actually. He's come and said, well, I'll let the states handle it. Yeah, I don't have a problem with medical pot. That should be federally legal. Everything else, leave it to the states. Perfect. That's exactly what I want to hear from Trump. Perfect. 100% score. I don't even care, by the way, if the federal government legalizes it. Let the states handle it and just do away with the drug scheduling and have no federal laws about it. Pot is not a problem. It just isn't. It's a lie. It's an old mythology that was spun by a bunch of moralists and people in the pulp, paper, and oil industries, among other things. It's not a conspiracy. It's not hippie-trippydom to say that. It's literally, historically, what happened. And a bunch of religious people worried that it would, little Jimmy got high and he played with the no-no zone. He self-harmed, his penis. And so now we know that it's the devil's weed. That's about all. Peace out.